David is an old man, and eventually he becomes a very old man, and he has this young girl who serves him, who keeps him warm, but he hasn't had any physical relationship with. Okay, her name is Avishag, the Shunammite from Shunem, right? At the moment, there seems to be sort of unimportant, that fact. I mean, yeah, we do learn things from them about the fact that he didn't look after clothes, so that he was punished measure for measure when it wasn't really a punishment, whatever, right? But it actually has more of a political relevance to the continuation of the story. Okay, his son Adoniyahu, who is fourth son, the son of his fourth wife, would like to make himself king, and he really did. He proclaimed himself king without the knowledge of his father. It doesn't look like from the story that this was there was no intention of civil war. David wasn't up to it. He was much too old. He was in his room. He didn't know what was going on, and there was no reason to think there would be a big opposition to this. But the prophet doesn't like this idea, because the prophet knows this is not God's will, because he already told David that Shlomo would be the next king. So he comes to the wife Bathsheba and says, "You've got to go and tell the king, otherwise you and Shlomo will be the candidates for execution very soon. As soon as King David dies and Adoniyahu takes over properly, then you will be for the block." That's what they call it. You bring ahead of the block. So we had to mention that the people who supported Adoniyahu in his proclamation of his being king were Yoav ben Zeruiah, who was the head of the army, and Eviasa, who had been a deposed Kohen Gadol. So both of these people had an interest in supporting Adoniyahu, because they'd really both fallen out of favor of King David. And this would sort of bring them back in favor with the new king, right? Whereas Tzadok, who was the Kohen Gadol, and Benayahu ben Yehoyada, who was the head of the Kresi and Blasi, were not supportive of this move, okay? And of course the prophet wasn't either. So what happened is she went in and she gave a speech and about all the things that have been happening and his supporters, and so did the prophet, followed her words, right? And said that they have proclaimed him as king in Ein Rogel. That's what we're up to. Pasuk Chava. Veli, but to me, Adoni Avdecha, to me your servant, Ule Tzadok HaKohen, and to Tzadok, who is the high priest, Ule Benayahu ben Yehoyada, who is the head of the crack troops, David's royal troops, Veli Shlomo, and to Shlomo, who is the one who was meant to be next king, Avdecha, your servant, Lo Kara, he did not call. Interesting. I only just noticed this now because I'm going over it. The Pasuk uses the word Avdecha twice. Yeah?
Yeah. To me, your servant.
To me, your servant. And Shlomo, your servant.
Yeah.
But there's two people in the middle who are not referred to as his servants.
Tzadok.
Tzadok HaKohen. And Benayahu ben Yehoyada, which it doesn't say Avdecha. Avdecha with a Yud would be your servants.
Because it's the mother talking and her son.
No, not the mother, it's the prophet.
Ah.
The prophet's talking.
And he calls his
He
son
calls himself the servant. He
and
calls Shlomo the servant, but doesn't call the high priest his servant.
Or
and he doesn't call Benayahu ben Yehoyada. So if it had just been the high priest, I could have understood that. Maybe the high priest is sort of a parallel authority. One's the physical authority and one's the spiritual authority, right? Maybe. But Benayahu ben Yehoyada, he's just the head of the army, right? I mean, Chazal have a take on this. I mean, they didn't take on this, but they say Benayahu ben Yehoyada was actually the head of the Sanhedrin.
Wow. Benayahu ben
Yehoyada. He was the head of the Sanhedrin, and when it says he was the head of the Kresi and Blasi, which is two very obscure, strange words, it doesn't really refer to slingshots and archers. It means the head of the Sanhedrin. Now that might make sense, because both the Sanhedrin, which is the high court, and the high priest are both really, in a sense, not subject to the king's authority. It means the high priest runs the temple. I know. Still weird. But let's see, someone has an Sanhedrin. So,
Is the high priest subject to the high court?
yeah, for sure. The High Court is everyone's subject to the High Court.
Even the king.
But the king not.
Okay,
Right?
well, the king has certain
Exceptions.
Kingly.
No, but doesn't he has to listen to the High Court? That's the wrong way to say it. If the High Court says you're not allowed to do this on Shabbos, the king can't disagree,
Okay.
right? If the High Court says this guy is guilty of a certain crime, but we don't have proper evidence, and the king says, I don't need proper evidence, so he's not going against the court. He has special rules, but the High Court has the authority to put the king to death.
So
If they feel that the king has violated the Torah law, the king is not above the law. He's not beyond the law. So in a sense, they have even when the king wants to go out to war, he has to ask their permission.
Oh.
Because when the king goes to war, he's putting people's lives at risk. And only they have the authority to do that. So it could be that's why Benayobian, as the head of the Sanhedrin, he's not considered his ever. I don't know why. And the high priest. I'll tell you why it's hard for me to deal with, because I could hear the high priest, but then also the prophet also should be included in that. And the prophet includes himself in those who are Abdech, and he bows down to the king flat out. So, don't really know how to deal with it. Your suggestion to them?
No, can the high priest tell the king to go to war? The high court?
Not that I know of. Except that the king does have to. The king, if he wants to know what to do, will ask the high priest, and then the message will come on the thing. But still, that doesn't make him the king's servant. That doesn't take him away from being the king's servant. He's just like a vehicle through which God. I don't know. Anyway, something to think about. All right. So these people were not asked. Loikara, he did not call. Means Adoniyahu, who is the one who's usurped the throne, taken the royalty, the kingship for himself, didn't ask these 4 people to come. Not me, not Zadok, not Benayahu, and not Shlomo. That's 5 people.
That's 4 people.
Me, Zadok, Benayahu, sorry, 4. If from my master the king this matter has become, that means if this is the king's will, well, fine, no problem, right? If from the king, my master the king, nihiyah, it has become. Hadavar has this thing, and you didn't tell your servant, you didn't tell me for some reason. Al kisei hamelech acharav. Who will sit on the king's throne after him? So he's asking, is it really happened? Did you do this without telling me? Which is, he doesn't say that's okay or not okay, but it's a bit strange that you would do this, but he's not assuming anything. You understand? When you speak to the king, you can't make any assumptions, because he basically has the power and the right to do what he wants. So I'd like to know, did you do this without asking me? And the king says, Vayan, Hamelech David. And the king answered, Vayoim, and he says, he doesn't directly say, Kiru li Bathsheba, which means, call for me Bathsheba. So it looks like she wasn't in the room, although we didn't mention that she left the room.
Interesting.
Right? It could be when the king has to have a conversation with the prophet. It's out of place for Bathsheba to be there because he may want to say something that is private. So although we know that the message was a repetition of the same message, the king didn't know that. So the king probably told everyone to leave the room so he can have this private audience with the prophet. So he says to bring Bathsheba back. And she came, Lifnei HaMelech, in front of the king. And she stood, Lifnei HaMelech, in front of the king. Vayishava HaMelech, and the king swore. Vayomar, and this is what he said. Chai Hashem, which means, as God lives, or by the life of God. Asher pada es nafshi, who redeemed my soul. Mikol tzara, from any difficult situation. I mean, the God who saved me in all the situations that was in the past, whether it was from the lion and the bear, or whether it was from Goliath, or whether it was from Shaul, or from the Pelishtim, or myriad wars that he fought, that God, what about him? As this God lives, ki kashen ishbati lach, that just like I swore to you, means David's remembering the oath that he swore to Bathsheba. Bathsheba Elokei Yisrael, by Hashem, the God of Israel. Lamar, saying, Ki Shlomo b'neich, but Shlomo, your son, Yimloch Acharai, will rule after me. V'hu yeshev al kisi tachtai, he will sit on my throne instead of me. And just like I swore that then, so I swear now in the name of God, kichein es hayom hazeh, that so I will do today. David's promising his wife that he would keep his oath to Shlomo should be the next king, but not only that he'll leave that in his last will and it'll be read out after his funeral, no, but I'm going to do it today. Before I die, I'm going to make him king. In order that everyone should know that Adoniyahu is not to be the next king, but Shlomo. And not to be the next king, he actually going to make him king. So as we'll see, he actually ruled during David's life. Right? Vatikoy Basheva Apayim Eretz. So she bowed down with her face to the ground. Which is a bit funny. It says Vatishtachu Lamelech, and then she prostrated herself to the king. So it looks like the kida, which is not hishtachavoya, you can also do with your face down to the ground. Do you know what I mean? Kida really means to get like on your knees, right? So we do on Yom Kippur, we get down on our knees, and then you put your head to the ground,
yes.
Right? But that's not called hishtachavoya. Hishtachavoya is when you prostrate fully.
Like just
Like they used to do in the Beis Hamikdash, with your hands forward and your legs back.
completely. Yeah.
Right, completely. So it looks like she did the first stage. That's called Apayim Eretz Vatishtachu, and then she prostrated herself Lamelech to the king. So although she didn't do that the first time she came to speak to the king, because now it's her way of saying thank you. Right, this is the way you say thank you to the king. And she said, Yechi Adoni HaMelech David L'olam. May King David, my master, live forever. I guess that's an expression. Nobody lives forever, right? That's what you say. So in English, they long live the king. How long? Long. No, how long's a piece of string? Longer than a short piece of string, right? There's no definition. But in Hebrew, don't say that. They say Yechi HaMelech L'olam. Forever. So maybe she means because he lives through his children, right? Or maybe it's just a respectful way of greeting the king. I'd like the king to live. I know you don't know he lives forever, but I would like the king to live forever.
Or like his vision, his ideas.
Could also be, right.
Like,
That will carry on. Okay. David, and King David said, Kiru li l'tzadok. So she now, he tells his servants or whatever to call Tzadok HaKohen. He was the high priest. Or Nathan HaNavi, who I suppose has also left the room in the meantime. Okay. Nathan is the prophet who came. Or he wants to make a meeting with all three of them. Tzadok HaKohen, Nathan HaNavi, or Benayo ben Yehoyada. He's not calling his son because his son is too young. His son is not in a position to. I'm sorry. It's obvious. These three are going to coronate Shlomo, so he's not calling Shlomo. These are the three who are responsible to do this. Who are they? The high priest, the prophet, and the head of the Sanhedrin, or the head of the troops. However you see Benayo ben Yehoyada's job, right? It makes sense that he should be part of this coronation. And they came in front of the king. So all three of these three people arrived in front of the king. He said to them, take with you as Avdei Adonechem, the servants of your master. Now, who is that referring to? Well, their master is him. So the servants of their master are his servants. Right? So would it be more straightforward to say, take my servant? No?
Right. Yeah.
It's like trying to scratch your right ear with your left hand, like this. Right? As Avdei Adon. So we had this expression with Yoav once. And then we said because some people were loyal to David and some people were loyal to Yoav. And he was telling to take those who were loyal to Yoav and not those who were loyal to him. Because those who were loyal to him were fighting with Amasa. Remember that whole story when they chased after Shalom ben Bichri? But it doesn't work over here. So this is going to be a public event. I suppose it's those who have not been invited to the coronation of Adoniyahu. So that's happened, and the people are still there, as we'll find out later on. They've not come back to Yerushalayim yet. They've been Ein Rogel, and David he wants them to act now. Take the servants of your master. I guess that's what it means. Those who are still loyal to me and haven't gone away. V'hukavtem eshloimai, and ride Shlomo means to put him on an animal, to take him for a ride. Rechev is a horse, is a car. Leharkiv means to put somebody else for a ride. Shlomo Solomon, my son, al ha pirda, on a, what's it, pered?
Cow.
No, that's a para.
Oh.
Too dry, but there's a dalet in the middle. Pered.
Donkey. No.
Almost.
Mule.
A mule. Right. A donkey is aton. Okay? So a cross between a donkey and a horse gives you a pered. Now the word pered actually means individual.
Oh wow.
You say in Haredi kids on Pesach play a game called Zug or Pered. You hold a number of nuts in your hand, and the other guy has to guess whether it's odd or even. In English, you say odd or even. Odd or even. And if he gets it right, you have to give him. And if he gets it wrong, he has to pay you the number that you have in your hand. You didn't play that game as a kid? No. Because you didn't have days when you couldn't switch on your computer, so you could always play computer games, right?
Yeah, but I was in bush.
Oh, you had?
I was in the bush, like horses, farm.
So that's the sort of game you could have played, but you didn't. You had Chamesh Avanim, 5 stones, and you had to go checks. Anyway, so that's called Zug. Zug means pair, Eve. Pered means odd. It's an odd number. Now, it's interesting, or maybe it's even odd. Why is this animal called a pered?
Odd, like an odd thing.
Odd.
Because
Well, no.
Because
Odd doesn't mean that. Odd means not even. On its own. It's the same word. On its own.
Because it can't
Probably.
reproduce.
It can't reproduce.
It's the last individual.
Right. You can't, they're sterile, these things, so it's probably the reason. It could also be because they're very dangerous animals. It means they can wild kick. Wild mules are very painful, and therefore people leave them on the road. They don't get.
A horse
You don't
can
get
also-
close. Yes, but apparently this is much more painful.
Okay.
Yeah, it's much more, but that's the reason why they cross these animals. They're much stronger than horses, right? Otherwise, it's silly. You're going to cross an animal; it's not going to reproduce. It's silly, right?
Fair.
The Gemara, the pasuk even talks about the pasuk in Chumash about somebody who invented these by trial and error, and then he invented a mule, and he's credited for this. So it's fascinating that he's riding a mule. Yes, it could be because the streets of Israel are very hilly, and they're not very. It's not very easy to ride a horse down the streets of Israel. Going around the streets of the Rova, right? Your horse is going to fall over the place. So it could be that's why they use a mule. Could be. Then you want to know why it's a female mule. Pirda, a female mule, isn't that a bit strange? Don't you expect a man to ride a male? Look, I wouldn't say it's important, the difference. I'm sure they're both just as good, right? But why tell him it has to be a female one? What do you care? Just a parrot is a normal one. You'll pick up a female if you want, right? Okay, that's another thing that needs explanation, but we've had this a few times. Avshalom was also riding a parrot. I'm not
Was he a
mistaken.
parrot or a
got stuck
pirda?
in a
Only his hair got stuck in the thing.
Was he riding a parrot or a pirda?
female.
Was it? I think that he was riding a parrot. And I think it's actually significant that he was doing that. He's got it wrong. Because when David HaMelech wants his son to be king, he puts him on a pirda. And David probably understands these things better than his son Avshalom. And the proof is that David is still king and Avshalom is dead. Understands? Avshalom probably doesn't understand exactly. Let's see what it says. Pered. Avshalom Rochel ala Pered. And Shlomo is riding on a pirda. So there must be something in it, right? And I told you last time about the chess game. I told you about my take on chess, about the king and the queen.
Yeah.
Right? The queen does all the work, even though in our countries queens don't do anything, unless Queen Elizabeth, right? But queens just don't do anything, even when they were queens. Like even when they were real kings, like Henry VIII. What did his wives do? They were just there to make children. They didn't run anything. They didn't even make supper, right? That's why they did nothing.
They didn't even make supper.
Right? So what do? So why I say that that's a mistake. That means that there's Kabbalistically there's a female concept that does everything, which is the Malchus. The Melech is a king with authority, but the Malchus is the king that is the government that actually does things. that runs the country. The king is the authority behind the Malchus. That's why the king in a chess game is the authority. The king's gone, there's nothing. The authority and the power that's invested in the government, it comes from the king. You had, I think, in Japan like that. You had the guy who was what was he called? The king of Japan was called
The emperor.
the emperor.
Oh, yeah.
Right, the emperor. And you had the guy who actually run it, I think it was called the shogun.
Yeah.
He actually run the place. And the king lived in in the Forbidden City, whatever it's called, and no one actually knew what was going on there. But the guy who actually dealt with things was the shogun. I think that's the difference between the melech and the malchus. It could be sometimes the king will do both, right? And I think that's the difference between having a pered and a pirda. A pirda means you've also got the female aspect to it, which is the malchus, which David wants. It could be that Avshalom truly just wanted to be the emperor, not to actually run things.
Not actually do. Wow,
Maybe.
that's deep. Oh, I like that.
Now, the same idea is why do you have a pered at all? Why don't you just have a horse? Because it's a cross between a horse and a donkey.
Yes.
So what's that got to do with anything? So a horse is a symbol of royalty, right? You never saw the King of England riding anything but a horse. Horse is a very impressive animal, right? But a donkey, what do donkeys do? Donkeys are like from, what's it called? No, Eeyore. What's that? Pooh Bear.
Yeah. Winnie the Pooh.
Winnie the Pooh, right? Right. So that's like long ears, a bit of a silly animal.
Mashiach's gonna write that.
Oh, exactly. That's the point. But Mashiach's going to write that.
Ah, really?
Right? It says, he's like a poor person riding a donkey. But so there's something in this. There's royalty and Mashiach, right? Which is really like the secular and the religious job of the king together. He's the warrior, the fighter, but he's also the spiritual leader, right? Because the spiritual leader has to control his physicality. Now, the word physicality and donkey is the same word in Hebrew. Chamor, chomer, physical, chumrius. So the reason why Mashiach is riding donkey, because he's the tzaddik who's in control of his physical. Now, a true king is like Yosef, who's got both aspects. Yosef is the royal. Yosef, actually, his name is the same numerical gematria as Tzion.
So,
Right? Tzion is two words together, the tzaddik and Yovam. Tzion is tzaddik yud vav nun. Tzaddik and Yovam. When you get the two together, you get the beauty of the Beis Hamikdash, which is Tzion. Right? Beis Hamikdash is the center of spirituality. It's also the most impressive building. So it's like Greece in the sense it's Greek architecture,
right,
with the beauty and the choir and the beautiful clothes of the Kohanim, but they're the apex of spirituality. That's Tzion. Yosef is the one who's able to do the two things together. Yosef was handsome. He was a king, but he's also the tzaddik. Right? So Yosef is the two things together. Right? And that's really the job of a Jewish king, to put the two together. So you've got the horse, which is royalty, which is secular royalty, and you've got the chamar, which is the Mashiach, which is controlling them. So that's why we need a pered, because the pered is actually the mixture of the horse and the donkey. That's why you have that species. Now, why you have the female pered, right? Because the point is, you've got to do something. You've got to be as an active king who's both royal and spiritual. That's why the right animal to ride when you want to become king, right, is a pirda. And that's why David says, ride a pirda. Avshalom got it right, but not completely right. So he's riding a pered. Okay, that's my take.
Wow.
For what it's worth. You liked it, Danielle? Your
It's
face
not
is lighting up.
It's because you think like, what does that matter? Pered, Pirda, move on to the story. But then when you peel away like the layers and the
yesterday I asked AI. I have to admit my sins. I asked AI why sometimes the word kara, which means to happen, is written with an aleph. To happen should be kuf reish hey, and kuf reish aleph means to call, right? So and we've had a few examples of this where it's written the wrong way. So I asked AI. So Eastiv Mevalbelet HaMoach, as they say in Hebrew, which means just, so it has all this academic nonsense, right? That the language developed over many, many years, and there's no real difference between with a hey and an aleph because you can't hear the difference, right? And so eventually the original form dropped out of usage, and there's still some places where it still remains. I said, do me a favor. First of all, why should it remain in certain places? Hundreds and hundreds of places it's right, and there's one or two places the author didn't remember to change it, right? I said, anyway, this didn't develop over the years. This is God speaking to Moshe Rabbeinu, right? So AI always admits, right? Because it realizes you don't want to hear an academic answer, right? You want to hear a nice frum answer, right? Because you're a frum person, right? So he says, oh, I'm very sorry, always admits it's mistake. I understand that coming from the standpoint that the Torah is a dictation from God to Moshe Rabbeinu, I mean, if you believe in that nonsense, right, then I'll give you a different approach, right? And then he says a different approach, which he claims it's so amazing what his sources he brings us some nonsense, right? This idea comes from the Ramban. Yes, the Ramban says that kara means to happen, and with a hey, and kara with an aleph means to call. Yes, the Ramban makes that point clear. The Malbim makes that point clear. The Radak makes that point clear. But none of them say the point that he's saying, which is, he made up this point, idea, which is,
the AI
made up this idea, and then claims that Radak says it, and then says, well, can you show me this Radak? And show me, I looked at Radak. Radak doesn't say any of that. It just says the difference between the aleph and the hey, right? And it also says, although it says an aleph here, it means as if it had a hey. Yes, the Radak says that, but it doesn't say why. It just says, yes, sometimes it's written with an aleph, but it means with a hey. Yeah? But what's the reason? Then AI said the reason, his reason. Yeah? I don't get to say it's a nice idea. I admit it's a nice idea, right? Which is that it could be, you said this at the time, I can't remember, that some things look like they're a coincidence. And when something looks like in the Torah it's a coincidence, the Torah says this is not a coincidence. Now, I think when you said this, I said, well, nothing's really a coincidence, right? So therefore, there shouldn't really be two words at all, right? But the point is, some things look like they're a coincidence, and it's important to know they're not. For example, the guy who killed Shaul HaMelech, right? Shaul HaMelech tried to commit suicide. He wasn't very successful, and Amaleki just happened to be there. Right, that's what it says. Yeah. He says, I just happened to be walking over Har HaGibor, which happened to be a battle site, right? And this guy just happened to be at the battle site. He wasn't a soldier, just happened to be there. So he thinks it's a coincidence. And the reason why he thinks it's a coincidence is because he's an Amaleki. And that's the whole philosophy of Amalek. That God's not really knows why everything's just a coincidence. Yeah. And I just happened to be there, and the king said to me, will you finish me off? So, in order for the author wants you to know that he thinks it's a coincidence, but it's not a coincidence. That's why God called him to be there. He didn't know God was calling him, but God was actually calling him. So it writes the word kara, which means to happen. It writes with an aleph, so you should know that God's calling him. So whenever that means the guy in the story thinks it was just a chance, but the author wants you, this wasn't a chance, and he's wrong. This was God calling him. So instead of writing the hey, writes the aleph. And also the aleph is a hint to God, right? Because the aleph, he's the aluf, the general of the world. He's the one, right? So in order to change from the hey to an aleph. Nice idea. So he said, would you like other examples of this? Yeah, I press yes. And then my computer says, if you continue to use AI for business purposes, we may cut you off altogether. Why? Because I have a filter. I have a net-free filter. And when you sign net-free, you won't use AI for Torah. Because they don't want you to read all this nonsense, academic nonsense about, you want to read academic nonsense about football, that's okay, right? So you're allowed to do research with AI for anything but Torah. You can't use AI for Torah. Torah, you have to look up the sources. Because AI tells you a load of nonsense, right? It makes up this stuff and brings Christian sources or makes its own sources and says it in the Radak, it says it in the Radak, and it just doesn't say it there. I checked them all, its sources out, it doesn't say any of them. Wait a second. So I said, at home, I can't go any further. It says, that's called forbidden use. If you use AI for forbidden use, you run the risk of being cut off altogether from AI. You won't be able to use it. My filter won't let me use AI at all. I mean, I don't know. I took the warning and stopped using it. Then I looked at here, I've got no filter over here. So I can do what I want here. So I checked it out. I had to go through the whole thing all again. I asked him, why did it say Quran Because he told me all this academic nonsense. I said, please, just tell me the real stuff. Don't tell me this waffle. Okay, so he said, okay, I get the real stuff. And then he says, I said, well, none of this actually says the point you're making, right? It just says the general concept, the idea, this nice idea. You didn't say it. I say, where do you get this idea from? So he said, I got it from the Bnei Yisoscha, which is Hasidic Sefer. I'm sure Rabbi Leader must have mentioned Bnei Yisoscha, right? Elul, Maimon Dalet. So I looked it up. There is no Elul, Maimon Dalet. There's only two Ma'amorim on Elul. I looked up out of the Sefaria, Elul 1 and 2. I looked up in the Sefer Bnei Yisoscha, Elul 1 and 2. There is no Elul, Maimon Dalet. So maybe he just made that up as well, just hoping that I wouldn't look it up. They say that AI just makes up sources.
And it's a letter sequencing.
Doesn't it know I'm going to check it out? And then people will say in a sheer quote, B'nai Yisrael said, look it up, A says it, you trust it, I'm just going to quote something, waffle it up. And they do. And my sons have had this, they looked up the Rambam. It's just not there, it's just nonsense. Again, ideas now, I like the idea.
Yeah.
It appeals to me, I like it. That's why I want to find the source for it, because I don't want to just do it and write it. I actually wrote in my notes. I saw in AI the following. I'm a bit embarrassed to write that. What? Rabbi Leader uses AI. That's the way you learn. Anyway, I asked so many people. No, I asked Rabbi Klein, who was an expert on synonyms, and I said, do you know the differences? Don't know. So no one's got an answer. So that's why push comes to shove, I turn to AI.
It's a nice idea, but it's not connected to any.
I know you have to see all the other examples. Wherever this happens, every time it occurs, does it fit in there? There's another example. It's in the Chumash. This is in Shmuel. In the Chumash, it says, "Ki yikarei kan tzipor lefanecha." When you see a nest and you want to the birds, you've got to shoo them away. So it says, the pasuk says, "If you happened upon one." So Chazal learned from that pasuk that if it's your own nest in your garden, there's no mitzvah. It's only if you're walking through a field somewhere and you happen to see one, not one that you made a nest and put the chicken in there. It doesn't apply to your own nests, right? It has to be something that you happened upon.
What? I heard a story.
No, it could be it's in your house,
Yeah.
right? You heard a story about a godler who did it. It was in his
In the room or around the mirror.
Yes, but then you didn't put it there. Just a bird came and put it in your house, right? But what you have to do is you have to be mafkir the place that it's on. Otherwise, the chicks automatically become yours. If they're laid in your house, when your mirpeset, whatever it is, the chicks are yours. And there's no mitzvah on your chicks. It has to be something that doesn't belong to you. You just happen to find. So the Torah says, ki yikareh. But then it should have had a head.
Yes.
Because it just happened. But it doesn't. It's with an aleph. I looked it up. Well, the bill's calling to you? No, so he wants to say God's calling to you.
Yeah.
You think you just happened to see it. You don't know that God put this bird here so you can do this mitzvah.
Yeah.
So that's why it does mean happen. But they write happen with an aleph when they're trying to tell you it's not like you think it just happened, a coincidence. Okay? All right.
It's a nice idea.
It's a nice idea. Maybe it's right. Never know. Well, maybe Rabbi Leader has a new version of Bnei Yisachar that has. All right. So why are we doing all this? I was saying that's a slight nuance. The word kara with a hey and an aleph has a whole shtickle tape.
World time.
Yeah. Okay. So he says, if this came from the king, then I want to know. So the king said, go and bring Bathsheba, and I want you to take all three of you to go down and anoint him on a period. That's where it's supposed to be. Okay? And he tells them where to take them. It's my period. You see, it wasn't just an animal to drive down, it was mine. It belonged to David. Now, you're not allowed to ride on the king's animal unless you're the king. So that's a way of publicly declaring that this is the new king. You can have two kings, right? But he's the king as well. And I suppose it was well known this was David's period. The probably was a very pretty one, maybe had a crown on it, I have no idea. Okay? But that was David's period. What?
Braided hair.
Asheli, which is mine, and take him down. Now, read it's to go down, so the hey at the beginning means to call somebody else. Take him down, El Gichain, to the Gichain. The Gichain is the river, right, where you get the fish to bite your dead skin. Yeah. That's called the Gichain. It's the one spring, as you see, that Gichain which is there, still flows now, was there 3,000 years ago.
And Gichain is just a name for spring, that's what that was.
No, that spring is called the Gichain.
What?
In Yerushalayim, the water company is also called Gichain. The guys who supply you water, drinking water, and take your rubbish away. They're called Gichain. They came from there. That's the Gichain. It's the strongest stream in the whole area of Yerushalayim.
Yeah.
And the reason now, why do it now? Why not crown him in the palace? Why do you have to crown him by the river? The idea is, just like that Gichain is here 3,000 years later, the royal house of David will never be. You understand? We know that rivers generally don't dry up.
Yes.
I mean, rivers might do, but springs don't. A spring, the reason why it's here is because it's always been. There's no reason why it should change. Unless there's some enormous, earthquake which changes the whole pattern of the underground springs. But usually they're still here. So that's the idea. It flows and it flows and it flows and it's always got life force. So it's a way of praying to God that this dynasty that we're putting into place now should continue like that. And you see from this idea that there is in Jewish culture, there's an idea of doing things symbolic, right, to inspire prayer. Like we learn this idea that you eat pomegranates on Rosh Hashanah. Why? Because pomegranates have got hundreds and hundreds of seeds. So what? So we pray to God that we should have lots of children like this, or we should have lots of mitzvahs like this, right? So the idea of the symbolism that it's a system of prayer to latch on to prayer, you learn from here. We learn from here.
That's right.
Okay, fine. Umashach oishay sham tzadok kohen. Umashach means to
Pull. No, that's what
the chav.
Mashiach, to anoint.
To anoint, right? Umashach oishay sham, and he shall anoint him. Who shall anoint him? Tzadok HaKohen, v'nosan hanovi. So that's really should they. There's two people, right? Not he. Mashach means and he will anoint. Who's the he? Tzadok and Nosan. So it should have said umashchu, right? I guess that was one person who physically did it in the presence of the other.
Right.
That means one was, like you said, there's the Melech and the Malchus. The authority comes from the prophet, but the one who actually physically did it was the high priest, or the other way around.
Even when you get married, you need 2 witnesses.
Yes, for sure there was more witnesses. But the actual anointing, the actual physical anointing, you take oil from a bottle, you pour it, the guy said, who actually poured it? Here it says in the singular, right? But then it says, and who's going to do it? It says 2 people. Right?
But you don't want to do it in front of all the really a crowd, so that
That's what it
people
did.
know.
No, for sure.
There was
No, it wasn't in front of the 2 of them. No, the big crowd. It says, go down with the servants. Said. Avdei Adonechem. Sure, there were lots of people there. All the people who hadn't gone to follow Adonio would come to do this. Right? We'll see later on how many people were there. Okay. All right? But the actual physical anointing was done by one person. That's what I meant in front, under the authority of the other person. Right? He says, pour, and he'll pour. Right? But I think the authority comes from the prophet. That's why it's obviously the authority comes from the king. The king was in bed. The prophet is the one who's got the authority to, just like the one who anointed David was a prophet. Rabbi Shmuel, who comes from God. And the high priest is the one who actually is doing this. I suppose the high thing, accepting the king's authority. So they do this. L'melech al Yisrael, as king over Israel. Usekatem b'shofar, and you shall blow on the shofar to announce this. V'amartem, and you shall say, Yechi hamelech Shlomo, long live King Shlomo. Don't say he should live forever. Right? Because there's already a king who's going to live forever. Right? So we're actually both kings at the same time. Va'alisem achor, and then you'll come up afterwards, because the spring is at the bottom of the hill, and you come up to the palace. Uba, and he will come, ve'yashav, and he will sit, al kisi, on my throne. Because David isn't on his throne, David's in bed. Right? V'hu yimloch tachtai, and he shall reign in my place, even though I'm still alive. V'oisoid sivisi, and him I have commanded, it means I've commanded Shlomo, Lihiyos Nagid, to be the ruler, Al Yisrael, Al Yehuda, over Yisrael means the other tribes, and the tribe of Yehuda.
Why does he make the distinction? Isn't Yehuda?
I don't know, but always mentioned separately. Okay. And we remember when we counted them, 800,000 plus 500,000. They're the ones who are the war tribe, they're the royal tribe, they're the aristocracy. Okay? So he's king over all of them.
This is before his bar mitzvah.
Yes, apparently. With the indication of that we'll see later on. And Benayahu answered the king, and he said, Amen. Meaning,
So will be it.
yes.
It is trusted.
Yes, which means
Means amen. From like emuna, like trusted. It's trusted.
what are you saying? See, when you say amen to a bracha, you're saying, I hope this will come true.
Right.
Or I believe that God can do this. Or I believe that God did do this. Depends on when you amen to something in the past, the future, a request, all different things. God did this, he can do this, I hope that he will do this. So what are you saying over here? King David just said that God, I'm giving you a job to do. You know, if I say, will you take my check to the bank? You don't say amen. Right?
Well, you couldn't say yes.
You say, I will do it.
Right.
That's what you say, right? You should. I suppose.
Long live the king, maybe.
Right, something like that. Something like that. When he says, and I want him to be king in my place, well, we also pray for that to happen. But anything can happen between now and by the time we get down to the river. Look how he continues. Ken Yomar Hashem, so shall God, the Lord of my master the king, say. It means you want this that he should be king, but so many things can happen between now until we get down to the river, right? You know, he can drop dead. There can be a rebellion. There can be an earthquake. And goodness knows what's going to happen. So Benayo is actually praying, Amen. Ken Yiratzon. So it should be God's will that he should be king. Right. You've expressed your will, what you'd like to be. God should also agree with that. Right. Okay. Kasher haya Hashem im Adonai hamelech. Just like God was with my master the king, this is Benayo continuing to speak. Ken yeh im Shlomo, so he should be. With Shlomo, that this is a prayer. V'gadel es kiso, and he should elevate his throne, mi kisei, beyond the throne of Adonai hamelech David. Well, that's an interesting thing. He's saying. V'gadel, from the word gadol, turn over the page.
How come there was writing?
Because it's from my notes, from my version here. Sorry. Haven't get around to the full copy. So that means he's praying that Shlomo Melech should be a greater king than King David. And Chazal see in this an interesting insight. You don't usually say that to a king. I hope the next king's greater than you, unless the next king is your son. Right? Because people are not jealous of their son's success. Right? I think Chazal is the only person you're not jealous of is your son should be even greater than you. Right? So that's why it's not out of place, even to speak to the king and say, I hope that the next king is greater than you, if the next king is his son. So that's acceptable and that's okay. Alright. Vayered Tzadok HaKohen, V'Nasan HaNovi, and Tzadok, the high priest. I say high priest because that's what he was. It actually just means the priest. And Nasan the prophet, Benayo ben Yehoyada, what did they do? They went down. Now who else? V'Hakresi V'Haplesi. So that's probably when it says the servants of your master. It means the Kresi and Plesi. That's why we've always called them David's royal guard. Vayarkivu Shlomo, and they made Shlomo ride al Pirdas Hamelech David on the mule, or the female mule of King David. And they took him. Al Gichoin. Well, literally means you should say El, right? Al means upon. If you can't go upon the Gichoin because
they threw him in the river.
Well, only Yoshki can do that, right? You know, actually go on the river. But the thing is, it could be that it's not such a big river. It's not deep. You know, you can actually stick your feet in, and you're not going to drown there, right? So it could just mean they actually put him on it, right? Actually, he rode on his donkey, on his period on the river, into the river. So now Tzadok took what he took as Keren Hashemen. He took the horn of oil, min ha'oil, from the tent. Which tent? Which bottle of oil? It doesn't say he took oil. There was a bottle of oil that was in the tent, ready for this job.
There was an oil given some sage.
Moshe Rabbeinu made anointing oil in the Mishkan 350 years before this story, 400 years before this story. Right? And that was meant for anointing the Mishkan, for the Kohen Gadol, and future kings. That's what it was meant to be for. And actually, Chazal say miraculously, the oil never got less. So the same 12 hin, it's called, amount that existed in the times of Moshe Rabbeinu, it hadn't been used that much, right? There were no kings in between. They anointed the Mishkan, they anointed Aaron and his sons, and that was it. And they kept it in the Mishkan, in the Holy of Holies. It was one of the things that was actually kept together with the ark, with Aaron's stick and the bottle of man and a bottle of anointing oil. So I presume that that's what Tzadok did. He went to get the oil from the tent. The tent would mean from the Mishkan. The problem is that the Mishkan isn't in Yerushalayim.
Shiloh.
No, it's not.
No.
It's moved away from there.
Oh,
It moved first to Noiv, which was then destroyed when Shaul killed all the Kohen, and then it moved to Givon, which is not so far, but it'll take you a good hour to ride there and back.
Would we want the Mishkan in
We will eventually want it in Yerushalayim, but it isn't. In Yerushalayim at the time of this story was...
The farm.
No. The farm was on the Temple Mount. But what of the Mishkan was actually in Yerushalayim was only...
the ark.
The ark. Remember? They'd moved the ark, which had been kept in Tel Stone. They moved it to Yerushalayim, and it was a tent. So, if the ark was in the tent, so then the tent being referred to here is the tent which the ark was in. So, although that oil was originally kept in the Mishkan, right? Once the ark had been stolen by the Philistines and then came back, so the oil was probably in the ark. Get it? And that ark was now in Yerushalayim, so it's not a big deal to go and get that. It means the Kohen Gadol would go into, it wasn't the Holy of Holies because the Mishkan was still in Givon. He would take off the cover, right? We're not sure exactly why that was such an easy thing to do, because on Yom Kippur you have a whole procedure where we do that. Maybe he had to do that as well. I seem to remember there's actually a commentary in the Chumash that says, if for any reason the Kohen Gadol has to go into the Holy of Holies, right? Well, I don't know if this is called a reason. I guess though, even for this, he would have to do sort of a service of special service where we can just go in. But there's no Holy of Holies here. It's just the ark. So I don't know. Anyway, he lifted up the top, take out the oil, and then go and anoint.
Why do we want the Mishkan at the Givonim? We don't like the Givonim.
Well, no, what else did we want it there? That's what it was. Why was it?
You don't want.
I don't know.
I
have no idea. I don't know.
We trust them even like with.
No, I don't know. The Givonim worked in the Mishkan. That was their job.
Ah.
Wasn't there also oil that Shmuel had?
Yes, that was not a horn, and Chazal say it wasn't the anointing oil. It was different oil because Shaul was not from the house of David. He was anointed with oil which wasn't the anointing oil.
Was Shaul the first king?
Shaul was the first king, yeah. Chazal say it was Sheven Afarsamon, some other type of nice smelling oil. So that's what we do. So Tzadok came and took the oil from the tent. Let's assume that means from the tent that the Mishkan, that the ark was in, and the ark had the oil from, and that had been returned by the Philistines together with the ark, right? And he anointed Shlomo. So who did it? Tzadok. I say in front of Nasan with the authority of Nasan. They blew on the shofar. And all the people said, let the king Shlomo should live. Okay. And all the people came up behind him. Means behind Shlomo, I suppose. Right? And Shlomo was the head of the procession, and all the people followed him. You know what that means? You know what the Chalil is?
We've had this word so many times.
We've heard it many times. Which in my opinion, all the places where it's mentioned are related. Halal, halalit.
It's not prayer, but it's a similar word. There's also like prayer, and there's one that's like murder, and then there's one.
Right, that's it. All these words are related. I think they're all related. The word halal means empty space. A halalit is modern Hebrew, is a spacecraft. Halalit. Halalit is a spacecraft because it means empty space. Okay? A halal also means a dead body. Why is a dead body empty space? Because it's empty of the soul's not there, so it's empty in that sense, empty of spiritual. Now, also chol. What does chol mean?
Sand? Or
yes, that wasn't what I expected you to say. It means a weekday.
Right. Yeah.
Why is a weekday called chol? How does that relate? Because
space between.
Because it's not holy.
It's empty of holiness. And why is sand called chol? What's sand empty of?
It's not stone anymore. It used to be stone. Now
No,
it's
it used to
not.
be seashells.
Ah,
Well,
so
silicon.
So that's what they tell you.
It's silicon. It's like it's
Can't grow anything in it. It's
Ah.
empty of life. It's not like soil. Soil and sand, the difference between soil and sand, in soil you can grow, and sand you can't. What can you grow in sand? Okay.
the water doesn't hold.
That's the only reason? There's no life in it.
It's just that salty.
It's just dead seashells, that's all it is. Crushed over
And
the
sandstone.
eons.
Right.
Well, sandstone is all that stuff is squashed together. But soil has nutrients in it. Soil you can grow. Soil's got life. That's soil. That's why sand is called chol. So I think all these words are related. Now this is another word, which is a chalil. A chalil is a flute.
Khalil.
Why is a chalil a flute?
Because it's hollow. on the
Right,
inside.
exactly. It's a pipe which is empty.
Well, then you could just call every wind instrument.
Maybe you're right. Maybe this is the basic. Maybe you're right. What other names are there for wind instruments? Maybe they're all called a khalil. You know, we have lots of different ones because we're very sophisticated, but they had a khalil. That's what they had. There's drum instruments. It's different.
They're also hollow.
Yeah, they're hollow, but you don't. Yes, but it's all covered. And you don't get to here. You don't blow into the hollow. I don't know. But you do. That's my take on it. Take it if you like it. If you don't like it, you can throw it away. Okay? All right, into the empty space. So the people are mechalalim b'chalilim. They are fluting flutes. Okay, and in Hebrew, remember, in Hebrew, we love to use that expression. In English, you're not allowed to do that. You can't flute a flute. You have to play a flute. Right? In Hebrew, you flute a flute. Mechalalim b'chalilim. Usmeichem simcha. The same thing. They're rejoicing, rejoice. You know? Okay? Usmeichem simcha. Gedayla. They're really happy. All the people, they're playing the flutes and they're dancing up in it. Vatibaka haaretz, and the ground cracked. Not literally, right? You know, it was like an earth crash, an earth rendering noise. No, noise never breaks the earth, right? Only earthquakes do. But that's how you say it. It's such a loud sound. It sounds like an earthquake. That's how loud the noise was. It was an earth crash.
Everybody was like.
Everyone was really, ecstatic. We have a new king, and Shlomo's a new king, and everyone was really happy. Okay. Now the thing was, by Yishma Adoniyahu, Adoniyahu heard, and was so loud. The people who were not so far away, anointing and coronating Adoniyahu, they heard it, the noise. By Yishma Adoniyahu, and Adoniyahu heard, v'chol ha'kruim, and all the people who had been called, Kruim with Aleph, right? Kara, who were called to the meeting where they coronated Adoniyahu, Asher itohu with him, v'heim kilu le'achol, they'd finished eating. So they were, I suppose, ready to go back. By Yishma Yoav, and then Yoav heard, Eskol HaShofar. Interesting. That means, well, everybody heard. Why are you picking at Yoav? So I have in my notes here. I think what I'm trying to say is he picked out a certain sound amongst the noise. Everyone else had just heard the noise, but he heard the shofar. By Yishma Yoav Eskol HaShofar. Yoav heard amongst the whole noise. He could hear the specific sound of the shofar, and that meant something to him. And he said, Madua kol kriya hoima, why is the sound of the city, Kiryah, right? Like Kiryas Yoel, which is where all the Samaras live, right?
I went there. Did I tell you already? No.
You told me, yeah?
All right.
You didn't tell me that, you told me you went to Satmar for Shabbos.
Right.
Kiryah, right, is like a town. Homa means in uproar. Why is the city in uproar? It means Yoav is the one who's asking the question because he's suspicious of the sound of the shofar.
Yeah.
Like doesn't bear good. It's not just like, Spain won the World Cup, right? So everyone's in uproar. There's no shofar when they do that, right? They may have their whatever they do, right? Yeah, but they don't have if it's Spain, they've probably got sort of
Shaking.
that would be Argentina. That would be the sambo dancing, where they call it. Okay, so he picked out this sound of shofar. That's suspicious. And he's worried. You understand? If Yoav understands, if things are turning against him, he's really in trouble now. I mean, he's already in trouble, and he only joined the sign of Adoniyahu to get out of trouble. If Adoniyahu doesn't win this, then Yoav's in bigger trouble for supporting Adoniyahu.
But Yoav got the whole army. He's got the army. Can't you just take the army and destroy the thing?
Maybe. Why not? He's got. Well, yes and no. We don't know how the army are going to side with him. He looks like through his career he's never been really scared of David because he might have the army on his side, but don't forget we have that whole army of Avshalom who were against David and joined with Amasa and all these people who are supporting this are not trying to rebel against David. They just think this is David's will. I imagine that's how it was sold to all the people who joined. David's too old to be involved in politics. Someone's going to take over. Okay, obviously it's going to be me, right? And now we're going to find out that this was not David's request. Now Yoav knows this. Yoav can't say, "Oh, I thought David's wanted this." Clearly not, right? So what happens? He is still speaking. I mean, Yoav is still. Sorry. Yes, whilst oid means still. Oidenu means he was still. Medaber speaking. But all of a sudden, Yonasan ben Avyasa came back. Yonasan, the son of Avyasa, who was the son of the removed from office Kohen Gadol, right? He comes, and he says, Adoni Yohu, boy. Adoni Yohu. Adoni said, boy, let him come. Come. Ki ish chayil ata. You're a man of valor. V'toiv tevaseh. You've obviously got good news. We've had this idea before. Good people bring good news. Right? Remember when he was the one, Achimaatz, right? He was the son of Tzadok. He was the other one's son. He was the one who wanted to come and tell David about the news of Avshalom but he wanted to break the sad news about Avshalom's death. And then Yoav said, no, let the Cushi go. Better he goes than you go. Right. You're a good man. You give good news on some other day. Now, if Yasa comes, he's actually got bad news, right? But Adonio presumes, someone like you must have good news because he's come from the city. I don't know why he was in the city. Maybe he was on duty in looking after the Aron. Like his father has supported Adonio. So why was he in the city? Could be. Someone's going to look after the Aron. So his father went and he stayed behind. So he found out what was going on and he comes and tells them. Vayan Yonasan. Oh, interesting. Whoa. How do you spell this name the last time it was mentioned?
Yehonatan?
I think it's always got a hey in it. Let's look back at where this name was mentioned. The end of Shmuel base, where he joins he and his father and the other Kohen Gadol all go back into Yerushalayim, and he, together with Achimaatz, stays outside. Remember where that was?
Yes.
Okay.
That was in that little.
There was a few places we had his name mentioned.
But his name is meant no haze here.
Correct. But last time he had his haze, if I'm not mistaken. I'll tell you where in just a second. Let's find it. That's where he's dead. Just before there, when they tell the news. They hide in the cave. They hide in the well. Oh, here we are. Yehonasan with a hay. That's the first time his name's mentioned, I believe. Then they come out of the city, remember? And then he gives his suggestion. He goes out of the city. Here, Yehonasan, again. If I'm not mistaken, Yehonasan. Each time it's got a hay. And now it's got no hay. What do you think happened?
He joined the wrong side.
Right. Because his father joined Adoniyahu. And the only reason why he stayed in Yerushalayim was because someone has to be with the Alright, that's my suggestion. But he still joined the wrong side. And that's why as soon as he hears the news in Yerushalayim, he quickly goes to tell them outside, you guys are in trouble because David has just anointed Shlomo by the Gichon. So he's the one who comes to tell that because he's on their side, which makes sense of why he's lost his hay. Good? All right. That's my guess. I hope it's right, because otherwise he won't be happy with me for saying this. Okay. So what did they do? So he thinks he's got good news, and Yonasan said, Mayan, Yonasan. And Yonasan said, Vayomer, La'adoniyo, Aval. Aval means?
However,
But. Means you think I've got good news. However, unfortunately, not such good news. Aduneinu HaMelech David, our master. Not just my master, your master too. Right?
Ah, wow.
He's saying our master. And usually you refer to the king as your master, because he wants to include Adoniyo as well. Himlich as Shloimei, and that he's a coronated Shloimei, and therefore your plot is not going to work. And he tells him more. It wasn't just on his own in private. He sent with him Hamelech, the king sent Tzadok HaKohen, Nasan HaNavi, Benayo Ben Yehoyada, Crazy Raplacey, Yirukavu Oto Al Pirdas Hamelech. He explained the whole scene. It's clear that this Pirda is important, otherwise you have to get all the details, what colored tie Shlomo was wearing. No, he gets them to ride on the king's mule. Right. And they anointed him. Who did? Tzadok HaKohen and Nasan HaNavi. Now, beforehand we said it was actually Tzadok who did it.
Yes.
All right, here's in the plural. Yes. They anointed him. Because the idea, yes, it was all of them did it physically. It was Tzadok who actually poured the oil on his head, right? But it was done in the presence of the Nasan as well. The Melech, the Gichain, in the Gichain. Yalu Misham, and they've gone up from there. Smechim, happy. Tehom, Hakiria, and the city is in uproar. Hu Hakol, that's the sound, Asher Shematem, that you heard. But Gam, not only that, in addition, Yashav Shlomo al Kisei Hamlucha. Shlomo is sitting on the royal throne. But Gam, and more than that, Ba'u Avdei HaMelech, the servants of the king have come, Levarech es Adonenu, to bless our master, HaMelech David. Means everyone, all the ministers and whatever, have all come to bless the king, Lemai, saying, Yetev Elokim es Shloimei Mishmecha. God should make the name or the fame of Shloimei better than yours.
More, yeah.
V'gadel es Kisai Mikisecha, and elevate his throne above yours. So I suppose that means he should be more famous and more powerful.
Than David.
Than David. All the people, apparently that was a standard greeting. That was the way you bless the father, his children should be bigger Tamach than he is. And that's the normal thing. No? You go to God, say, give me, say, he should be a big tzaddik like you. Yeah? No, I don't want to be a big tzaddik, I want to be a bigger tzaddik than me. Yeah. That's the way, the usual conversation when you go to someone to get bracha for your kids.
Did you get that bracha as well in your life that people tell you?
People want my kid. There should be a big Tamach like your father. No, I don't want to be big Tamach like your father. That's nothing. I want to be a real Tamach, much bigger, right? So that's the standard way, and that's what they say. But there's two things. Shame is fame, a name that people say, "Oh, wow, it's famous." But Gadol means accomplishing, more powerful, as which Shlomo Melech was. Yishtachu HaMelech ala Mishkav. Now Yishtachu is the singular. The king bow in his bed. Means all this was done with the king in his bed. So people would file past, and the king would nod to all the people. He wasn't bowing to them. Right. He was nodding his agreement and saying thank you for your blessing. Thank you.
Was he standing up or was?
No, it looks like he was in bed. Al HaMishkav.
Right. But that Shlomo was on the throne.
Shlomo was on the throne. It could be they moved the throne into his bedroom. Or no, there was two different rooms, the throne room, and then people filed past David's thing, past the door. Long live the king, whatever, they gave him the greetings, and the king nods like this. The Gam, Kacha Amar Melech, and also, this is what the king says. Baruch Hashem, blessed is God, Elikei Yisrael, the God of Israel, Asher Nasan, who has given, Hayim, this day, Yoshev al Kisi, someone who sits on my throne. Ve'enai ra'ot, and my eyes see this. So God had promised me that my children would continue my dynasty, and that Shlomo would be the next king, and I thank God that I actually lived to see this. Whew. So that's the end of Yonason's report about the situation, that this is really being established. There's no chance now. Everyone's really happy about it, excited about it, and the king's happy, and unless you make an all-out war, you're not going to do anything.
Right.
Okay, should we just finish the chapter?
Yeah.
And they were
terrified,
right, scared, shaking, or quaking, as we like to say the word. as a Charedi. Vayecheredu, and the people were scared.
It's like the Haredis, like they're shaking because of their fear for God, right?
That's it.
I love that name. It's really
Right. What do we call those? Jewish Quakers.
Jewish great.
Right. Vayecheredu, and they quaked, they trembled. Vayakumu, and they got up. Kol hakruim, all those who were called, Asher Adoniyahu, who were called to support Adoniyahu. Vayechu ish l'darka, each one went on his way. Everyone went home, so they wouldn't be caught by. Right? I said, well, I don't know. We just came for a picnic, right? So who's really scared? Adoniyahu Yareh, he was scared mipnei Shlomo, because of Shlomo. He wasn't scared of David. God was in bed. Nothing David could do. But there's a new king. Now, it's true Shlomo was his little brother, right? He could have been many years older than him. He probably was, right? Because Shlomo was only born, like you say, he was only 12. Adoniyahu was mentioned right at the beginning of the story. He's probably about 40, Adoniyahu. Well, David was king for 40 years, right? David had all these wives before he even moved to Yerushalayim. So he could have been 40, this guy, right? But it doesn't help you, your age, when you're facing the authority of the king. So he's scared. What did he do? What did he do? Vayakom, he got up. Vayelech, and he went. Vayechazek, and he took hold of, strongly, the kaunois hamizbeach, the horns of the altar.
Wow.
Now the altar wasn't in Yerushalayim, as far as we know. The altar was in Givon. Okay, so that's quite a way. They'd run there, go on horseback. He felt safe. The question: why would a person feel safe holding onto the horns of the altar? How's that going to help you?
Horns of the altar.
What's the
Sacrifice.
precedent for this concept?
We slaughter on the altar, we sacrifice the horns.
I think if you can pass me that siddur, I think you'll see the beginning of Parshas Moses where this concept comes from. I don't say this is right. I'm not saying Adoniyahu is right to think that he's safe there, but it's at least based on the following idea. It says at the beginning of Parshas Mishpatim. I think it's Parshas Mishpatim. I just went through it in my head. I usually know till the beginning of Sheni of each parasha because I used to learn it in shul. So that bit I know. I think it's over here. Here it is. Okay. One who strikes another man and kills him, he shall be put to death. And if he didn't plan this, and God just made it happen, then I will make for you a place where you shall flee. But if you do it on purpose to kill him in cunning, then you can take him from my altar to kill him. That's such a weird pasuk. Then it continues other things. And it just said there's a concept of city of refuge, which is for people who kill by mistake. Yeah? But if you kill on purpose, it should say, if you kill on purpose, then you can take him out of the city of refuge to kill him.
Yes.
Which is true, you can. But it doesn't say that, it says you can take him from my altar to kill him. That implies that the altar is like a city of refuge. And it's pointing out, although the altar is also a city of refuge, but if he killed on purpose, you can take him to kill him.
Right.
So the Torah is here hinting that there are cities of refuge, which we learn later on with the 48 Levite cities, with 6 major ones and 42 other cities, right? Those are the, but also the altar in the temple, the altar in the Mishkan, is also a city of refuge.
Right.
If a guy kills by mistake and he runs to the altar, you can't take him down from there if he killed by mistake. And the family who are allowed to kill are not allowed to kill if the guy's doing that.
But he didn't kill him.
One second. I'm saying the idea is based on this pasuk.
Okay.
Now, I think Chazal say, although they don't say about Daniel, it could be that he made many mistakes here, right? That means it is a refuge, yeah, for people who kill, and you didn't kill anybody, right? You deserve to be killed, maybe,
Right.
for your insurrection and your attempt to take over the throne, right? Maybe you deserve to be killed, but it doesn't say anybody who deserves to be killed can go to the city of refuge, only murderers. So that's the first mistake. Second mistake is you didn't kill by mistake, right? What you did on purpose. You knew this was wrong. So even if you had killed, you wouldn't be an excuse if you did it on purpose, right? See, it doesn't say it clear, right? Next one is, it only works for a kohen Now, it doesn't say that clearly. Not every guy can go and run on the altar. Only a kohen, it works. And the fourth mistake, it only works for a kohen whilst he's doing the service. It doesn't mean a kohen can just go and run on the altar and think he's safe there. It's a halacha which we learn from this passage that if a kohen killed by mistake, and he's in the middle of doing the service on the altar, and one of the guys in the crowd says, "Hey, you killed my brother!" Right? Well, you fell off that ladder, and the kohen thought nobody knew about this, right? And he started carrying on doing his temple service. No one knows about it, and the guy recognizes him. So as long as he's doing his temple service, you can't touch him. What will you do when you finish your temple service? I know you have to do it very slowly until the police arrive, and they'll, well, I don't know. You'll find a solution. So you have to wait till you get one of the knives, and you'll defend yourself when this guy wants to kill you. But anyway, that's where the misconception came from. That there is a concept in certain very limited circumstances that the altar is a refuge, and that's why Adoniyahu thinks that he's going to do this as well.
Okay.
It could be that's his reason. That's what he did. Got time? Hello?
Hello. Is Master Mishnah?
That's it. Okay, let's just finish this chapter, and we'll start continuing, which we actually didn't start because we're continuing from the previous class. You're welcome to just take to finish the chapter.
Sure.
Okay. Vayachazek, he yells, Vayugan l'shleim aleima. It was told to Solomon saying, Hine Adoniyahu, behold, Adoniyahu Yoreh es hamelech Shlomo. He's worried about the king Shlomo. He's just been made king. Hine, what has he done? Come in. Achaz, he's holding on the karnas hamizbeach. He's holding on to the horns of this bear. Think he's going to help him. Lame, but he says, Yishav ali kayoim hamelech. The king should swear to me today, Im yomis is abdoi, that he won't kill his servant Bacherev with a sword.
Right.
Now, why should I agree to swear? No, I don't want to. I'm going to kill you. Well, you're going to get someone to swear, and you have an upper hand. You have to have some type of leverage, I think Americans call it, right? English call it leverage, right? To be able to get a guy to do this. So I think what Adoniyahu is saying, look, I am at the moment disturbing the temple service, right? I'm standing on the mizbeach. I refuse to come down until you promise you won't hurt me. Otherwise, I'm just going to interrupt the temple service. Now, Shlomo Melech will say, well, I'll just send in the guys and they'll pull you down, right? Yeah. Then he's going to make a whole scene, right? Shlomo doesn't want to make a scene in the temple, like sending in the police.
Immediately the first act.
Yes, that's also right. But it's like the temple is like a quiet place where we don't send in the troops into the temple. The police, So, and I refuse to leave until you promise you're not going to hurt me. I'll come down peacefully if you promise you're not going to hurt me. Okay. So Shlomo Melech doesn't want to make a scene. He doesn't want to attack the temple. It's always seen in the news. The Sikhs attacked the Hindu temple. Or remember the thing in Haranoff, 4 Jews were murdered in davening. It's one thing to murder Jews in the street or blow them up I'm talking about the eyes of the world. Right. They can live with that. But Jews who are killed in the synagogue while they're praying, that's like a scene worse in people's eyes.
Right.
A little bit. They don't like us either way, but a little bit worse, right? So this is Shlomo doesn't want to make a scene. So Adoniyahu says, I'm only coming down if you promise. Shlomo, he says, Im yiyel ben chayil, if he will be a good guy, means if he'll show his mettle, means he deserves to be killed for what he did. But if he behaves from now on,
it's good. What's good?
Chayil, ben chayil means a valiance. If he shows that he's good, that's what I mean. It's like a guy's on parole, right? He did something, but if you show us for the next 2 years you can behave, then we'll cut your police. But anything you do wrong, even just a traffic offense, right? You go straight back into prison, right? You have to be on your best behavior. That's what Shlomo's man is saying. Anything, start off what peeps, then that'll be it.
You're on probation.
Right? That's exactly what he's saying. If he will be on his best behavior, then not one hair will fall to the ground. But if I find anything bad in him, then he'll die. Even though that bad thing doesn't deserve to die, but he deserves to die already because he tried to take over the throne. And I think Shlomo is only agreeing to this, not because he really trusts him, because he doesn't want to make a scene.
Right.
Which is what Adoniyahu's plan. He says, look, I'll make a scene here if you don't. So Shlomo feels the pressure. I said, okay, be best behavior, right? Shlomo Melech knows he won't be on his best behavior because it's very difficult.
Yeah.
Right? To be really, really, as they say, Yeled Tov Yerushalayim, is what they say here, right? On your best behavior. Okay, it's just one more pasuk. Yishlach HaMelech Shlomo, so the king sent messengers. They pulled him down from the Mizbeach. And he came. And he bowed down to his little brother, really was, right? Like we say, he was probably about 40-year-old. His brother was about 12, but he's just been appointed king by his father, who's still alive. And Shlomo says, Lech lebetcha. What means, go home. Like, we're not having a hug. This is not party time, right? I seriously understand what you did, the crime you did, trying to take over the throne. We don't lie. Was it innocent? I didn't realize. I thought my father would agree. I thought my father. You and I know the truth. Get out of here, right? I'm not killing you because I promised I won't. If you're on your best behavior.
He was like 12 when he...
Yeah, he's a clever guy. He knows exactly how to put the pressure on him, how to agree, but on the other hand, in a way that he'll have a good excuse later on. He sees him throw a piece of chewing gum in the street. Oh, that's illegal. In Switzerland, it's illegal.